Welcome to The Middle, a podcast about that messy middle in between job loss and the comeback, told by people who've lived it. From CEOs to veterans, athletes to analysts, we talk to folks navigating the unexpected turns in their careers and what comes next when the plan falls apart. These honest conversations will move you, make you think, and maybe even inspire you to leap into something new. Because behind every career pivot is someone just trying to figure it all out. And do you have just the one dog, or do you have multiple still?
I still have multiple dogs. I currently have 3 dogs and 2 shelter cats. The cats are convinced that they are dogs, and they actually go for walks with us every day.
That's awesome. My dog hates going on walks. You try to take her down the driveway, and she does the protest stance, like digging her feet in. She is a house dog. She just wants to sit on the couch and be lazy and eat the kids' chocolate chip muffins that get dropped on the ground. If I can come back as anything, if that's a thing, I want to come back as my dog Coco.
It's a good plan.
It is, right? So you and I knew each other at Lockheed Martin. I'll set that expectation for our listeners. But you spent 25 years in corporate America, Jen. And keep me honest, much of that was in aerospace. So I'm curious. I've always been curious. What drew you to that field?
So yes, absolutely. I was enamored with airplanes from a young age. I actually, oddly enough, watched the movie Top Gun when I was a young preteen and just was enamored. I was convinced that I was going to be a fighter pilot. And, most fads sort of come and go, but it just really stuck. So I was really committed to being in the aerospace industry, and for a lot of reasons, didn't go into the military side. So then ended up going on the civil side. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and ended up in a career starting in general aviation, culminating into my last nearly 10 years with Lockheed Martin, where we worked together.
I'm assuming you've seen Maverick or Top Gun 2 Maverick.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. I did not see it in the theater though, because, now I live in rural Maine, and we don't have very many movie theaters here.
The intro to Top Gun Maverick is the song that I play every time I travel and the plane has to take off.
Oh,
I don't know why, because I don't like taking off in planes. For me, it's the most nerve-wracking part. So, and it like just transports me, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And I play all that music, and we get up into the air, and it's cheesy, but it makes me feel better.
It works. Whatever works, right?
It does. And you and I knew each other at Lockheed. I remember first hearing your name when you were the director of F-35 comms. And you rose through all the way up to be the chief comms officer at Lockheed. Was that always your goal, to be in that position?
No, unlike a lot of people, I always just focused on growth. I love to learn, and I like to be challenged. And so, throughout my career, I said yes a lot. I moved a lot. It came with a lot of sacrifices. I left an ex-husband behind. I moved more times than I can count. So, currently I'm living in my 12th state. So I took a lot of risks in my career, and it really paid off. So when I joined Lockheed Martin, it was to work for a boss that I had worked for at Pratt & Whitney, which is where I was. I was at United Technologies, Pratt & Whitney, for I think 6 years, and then he recruited me down to Lockheed Martin, which was a gentleman by the name of Ron Rand. So he was my boss at Pratt & Whitney, and he recruited me. He was the chief communications and marketing officer at Lockheed Martin when I came down there. So he came, he recruited me into a director level role because I was an executive at UTC at the time, really as a way to just sort of get me in the door. And then he had some longer term changes that he wanted to manage. And, when we first met, when I went down to Texas, that was just another example of me saying, yes, sure, I'll do something different, hard, challenging, just from a growth perspective. And the F-35, as you know, was in a pretty tough position. So I went down there for a 6-month TDY, and they asked me to stay. But when they sent me to Texas in August, I am certain that they knew that that was not exactly a good recruitment tactic, and there was no way I was staying in Texas.
Texas in August is brutal.
Oh my God, I have never experienced anything like that. I am a Northern girl at heart. So I grew up in the Midwest, outside of Chicago. So I like 4 distinct seasons.
After Lockheed, you went over to UnitedHealthcare for a few years too. What made you want to go from aerospace and defense to healthcare?
So if you map out my progression, my career progression, I had never really been in the same role more than 3 years. Three years was the maximum I ever held the same title. I moved around in a lot of within companies that I worked for, lots of different jobs. When I took over as the chief communications and marketing officer at Lockheed Martin, it was during a CEO transition. Marilyn Houston had just been named CEO, and she was taking over the role. I had been working with her in my corporate capacity in media relations. And so we had that relationship. And I always like to say that we both sort of figured out our jobs, our new jobs together. And so my first year, I really had no idea what I was doing. So I spent the first year trying to figure out, how to straighten my legs and understand what the job was. The next 2 years, Maryland had a really strong roadmap of changes that needed to happen within the organization. Because if you remember, we were winding down, 2 decades of war, and really transitioning. The F-35 was at a pivotal point. And so the organization needed to look differently over the next couple of years. So we did a lot of change management that kept me very intellectually challenged. And then in year 3, things started to settle down and, seeing the results of all of the change that had been implemented. By year 4, I was getting a little bit antsy. By year 5, boredom was creeping in. And then by year 6, I really felt like I was stagnant. And so for me to stay engaged, I have to be challenged, and I have to continue to learn. And I was really proud of the team that we had built. And so I went looking for another challenge. I had always planned to leave corporate America by the time I was 55. At this point, I think maybe 49, 48, 49. I was right around that 50 cusp. And so when I started thinking about another challenge, I started thinking about my whole career in aerospace. And I don't have any formal training in communications and marketing, but I have a career in communications and marketing. And so I kind of wanted to challenge myself to see if I could take those skills and actually apply it to a different industry. And that's kind of how I ended up in healthcare. Didn't Not on purpose at all, and certainly transitioning to healthcare in 2019, moving to Minneapolis from DC, where I had been for almost 10 years. It was a lot of change in a very short amount of time.
Can I ask, have you ever had imposter syndrome or anything similar to that?
Oh, all the time. Absolutely. I had a career coach early in my career, actually, when I lived in Colorado, and I worked for a company called Jepson. They had a really great support system for young managers, and so I had a career coach, and and it's as simple as fake it till you make it. But it was all about, if you show confidence, people will actually give you some room to grow and move. If you acknowledge your mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and you do things differently. You don't make the same mistakes twice. Then that's kind of how you build that up. But I mean, every day, I'm a small business owner now, and every day I have imposter syndrome. But every new role, it was not a role that I was feeling 100% prepared for. It was the next level of learning. And I think if you are addicted to learning in the way that I am, then you're always feeling like you're an imposter. And the challenge is, how do you work above that? How do you get yourself out of that hole, so that you really do know what you're doing, instead of just sort of shooting from the hip every day, which I did a lot of over my career.
And you touched on a question I just had, which is how much of your learning would you say was on the job and just through raw experience versus maybe actually going and seeking out formal training?
I would say it's probably 95/5. I've never actually been trained by the person that I'm replacing, and I've never had like a formal, here's how you do your job. Because it's just assumed that when you are selected for a role that you're ready for that role. And I think that that's one of the mistakes that happens in corporate America is that you don't give enough people the support they need to be successful.
You mentioned you're a small business owner, and I want to get into that because to me, this is your middle. This is so much of what I love about your story. I want to go back a couple of years. You said at some point you realized you didn't want one more corporate job. What made you realize that? Did you have inner signals? Was there a voice in your head? Was it just an in the moment realization?
So my transition out of corporate America, so I went to healthcare. Healthcare went through obviously huge, big issues during the pandemic and challenges, as did every corporation. And so my decision to leave that company was a CEO transition, which is again, how these things often happen is when my CEO decided to retire, I decided that there were a couple of things not really working well for me, which was I didn't want to be in Minneapolis anymore because not only did we go through the pandemic and I was isolated from my friends and my family because most of my friends are in the DC area, but also George Floyd happened not far from where I lived, and that changed the whole face of Minneapolis. And so while it's a beautiful city, I landed there in the wrong time. So a lot of things. So made the decision to transition out of that company. And so I was coming up on 50 and I thought, okay, I'm staying in the game until 55. And so one more gig. I'll do one more gig. And I was started interviewing for the next CCO role in a lot of different companies. And I'm literally having, we're still on Zoom at this point, and I'm having face-to-face conversations with CEOs of Fortune 10 companies. And in the back of my mind, my inner conversation is, I really just could care less. I'm not passionate about what we're talking about. I don't feel fully engaged in this conversation. I don't want to move to X and X place. And so, mentally, I was just not in it. And I had a really honest conversation with my recruiter colleague who had been a really wonderful friend and mentor for many, many years. And frankly, with myself. And I thought it's not fair to these companies for me to be wasting their time. And it's not fair to me to try and do something that I'm not going to be good at because I'm not going to give it 110%. So I just decided that, I was going to draw a line in the sand, and that was it. I was done.
So at this point in your life, you've been a member of the C-suite at one of the largest aerospace companies in the world and at the largest healthcare company in the world. Did you make that decision to be done with corporate America, done with being an executive, knowing what you would do next? And if not, what was the first thing you did after making that decision?
There are two times in my life that I have been uncertain about what would be next. This was one of them. The other one was when I got laid off when I was 30, actually. It's interesting that these things happen in like milestone years. And so I got laid off from a company that I worked with on my 30th birthday. They announced that they were closing.
Oof.
I know, right? I was supposed to spend my 30th in Amsterdam, and instead I was like, they called an all-employee meeting. That's not a good sign. So maybe I should stick around and figure out what's going on. But I gave myself that space to kind of figure out what did I really want to do and what was going to be smart to do next versus just trying to find a job because I needed a job. And, at 30 years old, I did not have the kind of savings or financial security to stay out of the game for the long term. But I did give myself a little bit of space. And that's what I did when I made the transition out of corporate America, is I just wanted to give myself a little bit of space. I'm still an ambitious person. I still love to learn. I still need to grow personally. So the first thing I did was apply to go back to school. And so I applied for graduate school. I've been, in my free time, I've been active in animal rescue. So I decided to go back for a master's in animal sciences.
Wow.
Maybe become a vet. I just had all these sort of things in my head. And then I applied to be an adjunct professor in their communications school.
A vet is that's vastly different, Jen, than being a chief communications officer, and that's a pivot. So, are you a vet now?
So got into the master's program, and um, I live in Maine. My permanent home in Maine is on an island that is serviced by a ferry. So it only runs from 7 to 5. So in order for me to go to school, I would need a house closer to the university. So I was with a friend who is my real estate agent in the area, and we were looking at houses up in Orono, Maine, near University of Maine, and she was selling a motel, and the transaction was sort of falling apart while we were on this trip. And so I'm just listening to her, talk through all of this. It started asking her some questions, and I don't know what it was about that conversation, Megan, but there was just something that sort of a little seed that planted in my head. And the motel that she was selling was nothing that I would be interested in. But at 2 o'clock in the morning that night, I woke up and I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy a hotel. And I started looking at commercial listings. And there are a lot of hotels and inns that are for sale. And of course, in tourist states like Maine is, we have these quintessential New England little towns, and they're charming and they're bustling in the summertime. And so I first looked at hotels that were near where my home is, in the mid coast of Maine. And for a lot of reasons, those didn't work out. They weren't the right. I wanted something that had growth opportunity, because again, I still have ambition. I still want to perform almost in the same way that I do in corporate America, or I did in corporate America. And so nothing worked out in the local area. And then there were a couple of coming soon boxes on this website, and we asked about them. And the Blair Hill Inn was one of those. And I thought, now there's a pretty property. It's a beautiful Victorian house, sits on a hill, and it has a spa, it has an event barn, it has a restaurant. It sits on 80 acres, and it's in this area called the Moosehead Lake region in the Maine Highlands region. And so it's sort of off the beaten path. You do not come here by chance. You come here purposefully. You do not stumble upon us. I read the reviews online. I did a little bit of research, looked at their financials, and I ended up buying it sight unseen because I was still in DC. And I thought, yep, I don't want that to go on the market. That's my place. I can grow this. I can turn this into something, new and different. And that's kind of the path. And like most things, I jumped in with both feet, and honestly didn't do a lot of research. I think that probably worked in my favor because I came in too naive to know exactly what an absolute bloodbath it was going to be, trying to learn this business. And it has been a learning journey for sure.
Jen, I have bought a house sight unseen, but that was too livid with my family and children. I cannot imagine buying an inn that is also a source of income and a business. I mean, I know, and I do know that buying things sight unseen was actually a common thing during the pandemic for a lot of people, but that boggles my mind.
Yeah, it is. It was definitely risky. Now, granted, I could have bailed out. I came up here for the first time during the inspection. And so, there was still opportunity, but it was wintertime and it's a seasonal
Oh.
business, so it was not operating. So I never saw it in operation until I took it over.
And I want to say running an inn means you're handling everything now. You have gone from writing and overseeing press releases to plumbing and guest experience. Have you had a moment where you thought, maybe I can't do this? Maybe this is not for me?
I've had a lot of moments where I've thought, what am I doing? And why have I chosen this ridiculous life? I went from working 24/7 in corporate America and complaining about it to not really knowing what 24/7 meant until you literally are running a business that runs 24/7. I have a new appreciation for all of those payroll and accounting and HR professionals that just silently do their jobs every day in a corporate environment and make your job smooth so that you can just focus on your function. Because doing payroll for the first time was just laughable. I was like, I'm not sure. So I've made a lot of mistakes. My team was super, super flexible and patient with me as I've sort of learned that. I chose not to do an overlap with the previous owners
Oh.
because I knew from their, and they offered it, they were very kind. And they had been running the business for about 25 years, but I knew that I wanted to do it differently. And I needed to make my own mistakes. I know that about myself. And so, they gave me their insights. They gave me all of their references, their contact list, all that good stuff. Clearly I took over the reservation book that they had already booked before the transaction went into effect. And so the fact that I did not fail miserably on my face is 100% in that first year was 100% the result of a phenomenal team. Here's the things that I do know. I know how to market things. I know how to make other people feel good. And I have traveled the world, so I knew what kind of experience I wanted people to have when they came to my hotel. I didn't want it to be pretentious. I wanted it to be comfortable, but also luxurious. I wanted it to reflect all the things that I love about Maine. And so really tried to create that kind of environment. But learning all these different functions and dealing with problems. Thankfully, I'm a relatively handy person. So when the toilet clogs and housekeeping's gone and your maintenance guy is gone for the day, that's it. You do it. There is no choices. I've learned how to bartend. I've learned how to serve tables. I did know how to cook, and I try not to go into the kitchen, but I have done a couple of dinners and a couple of breakfasts when it's an absolute emergency. But yeah, housekeeping, we do it all. And so as a business owner, you have to be willing to jump in there when there are gaps in service.
And I think you hit a really key point of knowing what you can and can't do, both in your skills, but in what works for you when you go into a job, whether the job market is like it is right now, or if you're in a great job market, knowing what you want to get out of the work that you do, the fulfillment that you do day in and day out.
And I think not enough people do that work internally to say, what motivates me? What makes me happy? Think about the last time you were truly happy in a work environment, and what was it about that situation, that project, that team, that company that made you really happy? I loved airplanes, and I still love airplanes, and that has always been an incredible passion of mine. And so ending up with a career working for airplane manufacturers for the majority of my career um, wasn't a surprise to me because I got energy out of that. And so being their communicator and telling their story was something that I was proud to do because I believed in it. I believed in the product. I believed in the company. I believed in the leaders. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have bad days. It doesn't mean that there weren't issues that were uncomfortable all the way around. But for more often than not, I loved my job every single day is because I knew what brought me joy. We all have to find what it is that does that for us. You have to find what brings you joy. Otherwise, it's just a job. You can't build a career on a series of jobs. You have to build a career on an understanding of what motivates you.
You shared earlier that you've experienced a layoff, and we talk a lot about layoffs on this podcast. What advice do you have to people who have been laid off or let go? And are there any positives to going through that middle?
I believe in my Charlie Brown heart of hearts, that while layoffs absolutely suck, I mean, there is nothing that isn't traumatizing about being laid off from a job. Whether you like the job or you don't like the job, it's still a rejection that you can't not feel personally, right? But I do believe in every single one of those layoffs is an opportunity for you to reset. I said I've lived in 12 states. Every time I have moved, I have decided that, okay, what part of me can I improve upon as I build, a life in this new community? What mistakes have I made that I want this new community to see me differently in? And so it really has given me the opportunity, while it's a lot of change and it's a lot of, adapting to new environments, it's given me a lot of opportunity to remake who I want to be basically as an adult. And you don't get very many opportunities to do that.
You shared in a LinkedIn post, I believe, that some of your corporate competencies, and you said, and I quote, perfectionism, thick skin, and being direct are sometimes useless in your job now as an innkeeper. So how did you develop a different mindset as you went from a corporate role to your role now?
I think that in hospitality and in the service industry, I am working with people who feel more than your average corporate America executive. So there isn't a lot of conversations about feelings and relationships when we're in a boardroom or even in a team meeting. We're not talking about those soft things. We're talking about the job. We're talking about how we're getting it done. We're talking, even when we talk about people, we're still talking very objectively. Like, they're good at these things. They're great, at these things. These are the areas where they can develop, and how can we help them grow? Here, you're helping a single mom who needs to work but doesn't have babysitter. And, so you're trying to problem solve those kinds of things. I do that every single day here. And I take their circumstances into account when they don't show up on the job. I've had to deal with substance abuse issues. I've had to deal with addiction issues. Lots of things that never in my life could I have predicted that I would deal with. And I think it's made me a better person. I certainly know it's made me a much more empathetic person. But those skills, I had to sort of leave them at the door. And I've had several of my employees say, hey, listen, that might work in corporate America, but we actually just want like the human Jen, not the corporate Jen.
Yep.
And it kind of snaps me right out of it because, I used to put a suit on every single day, and I always called it my coat of armor. It helped put me in the mindset to be confident enough to walk into, our executive meetings every single day and do the job that I still, in the back of my mind, doubted that I was actually qualified to do. And here I wear jeans and, blouses, and I wear the same uniform when I work in the restaurant. And so I try more to blend in here than to stand out. And so it is really very much a different mindset, but it was hard to shed some of those old habits.
You said you don't regret your corporate career, but you knew you needed a change. So are there elements of that leadership life and that corporate life that you miss, or were you glad to leave it all behind?
Oh, there absolutely are. I say that I problem solve every day, but my problem solving is about, how to move tables after dinner service without disturbing guests. I miss the challenge of, this is happening in the world. This is how it impacts the company. And for our leaders to be looking to us to say, how do we frame this conversation? Like, the size of the problem solving and the impact that it had both on the company and the people that we worked with, but also on the world, honestly. I mean, the work that we did at a company like Lockheed Martin has big global implications. And we would lead news cycles, Megan. And here, I am making sure that the charcuterie gets into the guest room on time. And it's still just as important to my success, but it's just on such a small tactical scale. So I miss the big strategic problem solving. Absolutely. I miss having structure, honestly. And I kind of know what's going to happen during the day, but you got to be ready for just about anything. And then just being ultimately financially responsible for other people is a level of responsibility that I was not prepared for. Some days I just have this terrible pit in my stomach, like, is it all going to be okay? When I made the decision to go from a year-round business to a seasonal business, it was hard because I knew I was going to lose some of my employees because they needed year-round work, and we work. I mean, we're based in a small town, so them finding jobs so that they could continue to feed their families was an issue. And so you just feel this incredible responsibility to other people, and I miss the people. I mean, we work with some really amazing, smart, interesting people, and so I get that outlet through our guests. So we have guests that come here from all over the world, and they are fascinating. I have actually run into many people now that we used to work with.
Oh,
It is fascinating. So New England is a small region when you actually look at it geographically. So about a third of our guests that stay with us are from Maine. Oftentimes getting off the coast or southern Maine, getting away from the crowds there and coming up here to enjoy the mountains and the lake, and certainly New England, New York, all the way up. So you see a lot of both Lockheed Martin, Pratt& and Whitney, UTC, all those companies. And so one of my former colleagues literally was sitting in my dining room, and we looked at each other like, I know you. And she's like, I know you. And they have a house up here. And so they've been coming up here for years. And so it's just lovely to see those kinds of folks. And then there is a former female CEO who I have seen and known on the circuit when I would travel with Marilyn, who came as a guest, and I knew who she was, but I am never invasive with my guests. So it wasn't until like her third visit that she put together that she knew me too.
oh.
And she reached out, she was like, "Did we actually know each other?" I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't want to invade your vacation space with
Hmm.
work talk." So it's really been very fun.
I love that. More reason to come. All right, I'm booked. I'm coming up.
Come up.
My last question for you is, you've been, to quote Hamilton, in the room where it happens. When decisions, whether that's layoffs or large corporate strategy decisions, are made, what do people get wrong about what happens in those meetings?
That is a really great question. I have been in the room when those decisions are made. I think that there is a lot that people get right. But what they get wrong is these are very rarely short-term decisions. So it feels like in the moment that companies are trying to course correct to make the next quarterly earnings or um, you know, the annual financials, but layoff decisions, facility closure decisions, they get talked about and analyzed ad nauseum. These are not decisions that are made easily or lightly, and without a lot of really thorough discussion and exploration of alternatives. So while I'm sure that there are companies out there that make these decisions easily, the companies I have been fortunate to work for have never made these decisions easily. One of the hardest days I've ever had was to deliver that conversation to members of my team. We no longer have a job for you, and and literally to pass them off to somebody who's going to help them pack up their things and walk out the door, which I think is the worst thing that you could ever do. It's so humiliating for everybody involved, honestly. So working for a company that basically says, we're going to lay you off and you've got 30 days, whether you're going to continue to do your job or we're going to give you some career coaching, that is the way to do it, not to walk somebody out the door, because that's so dehumanizing. But then I had to go on camera to talk about how this was the right thing to do for the company with the news. I've never cried so hard, honestly. When I got home, I didn't want to do the job anymore. I mean, even now it still makes me emotional because, as leaders, it's the worst thing to have to tell somebody that, they no longer have a job. It's personal. It's personal for everybody involved.
Well, we are at the lightning round section, which is my favorite section of this
Okay.
podcast. So I have a few lightning round questions for you, Jenn. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What was your first job?
I was first in life.
First in life.
I was a corn detasseler, 13 years old.
What is a corn detasseler?
It's supposed to be lightning, Megan. You literally work 6 days a week. It's an agriculture job, which is the only job that you can do when or at least back then, when you were under the age of 16. 6 days a week, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. You literally are pulling tassels off of the top of corn stalks. It's how you end up with different varieties of corn.
Oh, I learned something new today. Okay.
Yeah.
Which person never fails to cheer you up?
Oh, my best friend, Jenn. She's just eternally funny and fabulous.
I love that. Jenn and Jenn. Does she spell it the way you do?
No. And she goes by Jennifer more than she goes by Jenn. But yeah.
What is your favorite junk food?
Swedish fish.
We're going to have to talk about that one. All right. Swedish fish. I've heard of them. I've actually never tried them, so maybe I shouldn't knock them.
Oh. I don't eat chocolate, so I am a refined sugar eater, and Swedish fish are the best form of sugar on earth.
I will have to try them. Okay.
Pick them up.
What is for dinner tonight?
I have no idea. I own a restaurant, so it's whatever the cook makes for us. They make us a staff meal every day. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What is one bucket list item that you want to fulfill?
I want to go to Antarctica.
Would you take a cruise or?
Yeah. Although my best travel partner, she's terrified of the Drake Passage, and she has motion sickness, and so she's like, maybe I'll fly and you can take the cruise. And I was like, no, we got to do it.
I've seen so many videos on social media of the Drake Passage.
Yeah, it's pretty. But I've been on every continent except for Antarctica.
Oh, well then you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. What is the best compliment you've ever received?
Wow, that is a great question. I think that the greatest compliment actually has been here when somebody tells me that this has been the best vacation experience that they've ever had. Because it feels validating that something that I really have no idea what I'm doing is kind of working.
What is a book you recommend?
I'm a classics person, but West with the Night is the book that I will always recommend. Burl Markham, she was absolutely an icon before we even knew that women could be icons, and I love her story. She was ruthlessly courageous.
Would you rather live in a world with no caffeine or no internet?
No internet. And
last but not least, if you could do any Olympic sport, which one would it be? Summer or winter?
Oh, I would want to be a downhill skier. I'm terrified of heights, and I am a very modest skier. Like I'm not really good at it. I could stay on my feet, but that's one thing that I think that adrenaline rush would be amazing.
Well, Jenn, where can folks find more about Blair Hill Inn?
You can find us on our website, blairhill.com, and we are located in Greenville, Maine, in the Great North Woods, and it is the most spectacular natural playground that you've ever encountered. So come on up and see us. We'd love to see you, and thank you so much, Megan, for what you're doing to help others make good career choices for themselves.
Well, I have to thank you, Jenn, for coming on. You are one of the women that has been kind of at the front of my career as I've looked up and said, what do I want to do? And as a woman, where can I go? And who are the leaders that I admire? And you have always been one of them. So I was so thrilled you said yes to this podcast. I'm so glad you came on. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And that is the greatest compliment right there, Megan. So thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to The Middle. If today's story resonated with you, drop a subscribe, share the episode, and let's keep these conversations going. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over. You're just in the middle.